In 1962, a group of senior American military officials sat in a room in Washington and proposed a plan. The plan called for staging terrorist attacks on American soil, hijacking planes, and even killing American civilians, all to be secretly blamed on Cuba. This wasn't a conspiracy theory. It wasn't fiction. It was an official government document, and it very nearly reached the president's desk for approval. To understand how something this extreme could even be proposed, you have to understand the atmosphere in Washington in the early 1960s. Cuba had just fallen to Fidel Castro's communist revolution, sitting just 90 miles off the coast of Florida. For American military leadership, this was an unacceptable threat sitting directly in America's backyard. In 1961, the United States had already attempted to overthrow Castro through the Bay of Pigs invasion, a covert operation using CIA-trained Cuban exiles. It ended in complete disaster, a humiliating failure that embarrassed the Kennedy administration on the world stage and left Castro more secure in power than ever before. After the failure at the Bay of Pigs, President Kennedy and his administration were desperate to find another way to remove Castro from power, without directly involving American military forces in an obvious invasion that could provoke global backlash, especially from the Soviet Union. The task of finding a solution fell partly to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the highest-ranking military officials in the United States. They began exploring options for justifying a full-scale American military invasion of Cuba. But for that, they needed something the public and the world would accept as legitimate provocation. What they came up with became known as Operation Northwoods. The core idea was chillingly simple: create the appearance that Cuba had attacked the United States first, even if no such attack had actually happened. If the American public believed they were under attack, invading Cuba would seem justified, even necessary. The document detailing Operation Northwoods proposed several disturbing scenarios. One plan involved staging a fake attack on the American naval base at Guantanamo Bay, creating the illusion of Cuban aggression against American forces stationed on the island. Another proposal was even more extreme: blowing up an American ship, potentially the USS Maine's successor in spirit, and blaming the explosion on Cuba, echoing the way the sinking of the original USS Maine had helped trigger the Spanish-American War 6 decades earlier. Perhaps the most shocking proposal involved staged violence against Cuban refugees arriving in the United States, and even the funerals of fake casualties, designed to inflame public anger and generate overwhelming political support for military action against Cuba. The document also proposed hijacking or destroying civilian and military aircraft, using elaborate deception involving decoy planes, so that authorities could later claim a real American passenger plane had been shot down by Cuban forces, despite no such plane actually being harmed. Some of the plans even discussed the possibility of real casualties among American servicemen or civilians, framed as necessary sacrifices to convince the public and international community that Cuban aggression was real and that military retaliation was justified. The man who signed off on this document and presented it as a serious proposal was General Lyman Lemnitzer, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, one of the most powerful military officials in the entire United States government at the time. Lemnitzer and his colleagues genuinely believed that provoking a war with Cuba was in the national interest, and they were willing to propose deceiving the American public and staging false flag violence to achieve it, believing the ends justified the means. The Operation Northwoods proposal was formally submitted to Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara in March 1962, requesting approval to move forward with the plans and ultimately seeking authorization from President Kennedy himself. Kennedy's response, according to later historical accounts, was firm rejection. He refused to approve Operation Northwoods, reportedly appalled by the scale of deception being proposed against America's own citizens and the world. Despite Kennedy's rejection, the plan was never punished or seriously investigated at the time. General Lemnitzer would later be reassigned to a prominent position as Supreme Allied Commander of NATO forces in Europe, seemingly without consequence for proposing the plan. For over 3 decades, Operation Northwoods remained completely hidden from the public. There were no leaks, No whistleblowers, no journalists uncovering the story. It sat buried in classified government archives, entirely unknown to the American people it had targeted. The truth only came to light in 1997 and 2001, when independent researcher James Bamford uncovered the documents through declassification efforts related to the Assassination Records Review Board, originally formed to investigate the assassination of President Kennedy. When the documents became public, they sent shockwaves through historians, journalists, and the public alike. What had once sounded like an extreme conspiracy theory turned out to be an actual, formally proposed government plan, one that had reached the highest levels of military leadership. Operation Northwoods remains one of the most unsettling declassified documents in American history, not because it happened, but because it so nearly could have. It stands as a permanent reminder of how far officials in positions of extraordinary power were once willing to go, and how close the plan came to receiving approval before one man said no.